it's me, Mimi Kong. Today I had an idea for something a little bit different. So this is going to be a scripted video, which is why you see I have a computer because I cannot memorize a script. I would call myself a pretty big Disney fan, as you can see like the various Disney things behind me, and I think I have, yeah, my Marie Tsum Tsum with me. I wanted to make this video, I'll kind of get into it later, but I'm not an expert, and it's become a goal of mine to become an expert on Disney, but I thought this video would kind of help. It's going to be an explanation of the Walt Disney Company for people who maybe don't know anything about it, or you only know like some things about it. Of course, I'm sure you've all heard of plenty of movies that are made by the Disney Company, such as Frozen, Bambi, Lion King, Hercules, maybe, Winnie the Pooh. But there's a lot more to the company that you don't really see just by the movies that have the little castle before them, or by just visiting the parks. This video is going to have 4 parts in it. I have a little bit of a little thing at the end too, and you guys can stay to watch that, but I have time codes for all of them just in case you're only interested in watching one thing about it. Even though I have the time codes, I highly suggest you watch the thing all the way through, since I'm going to start with a little bit of history and get into the fun stuff later so you can kind of build up your knowledge. First thing I'm going to be doing is talking about the history of Walt Disney and how he came to found the Disney Company. I'm not going to go really in depth. Then I'll go into all of the different studios currently owned by the company and how the idea of what is Disney comes into play. Like, you wouldn't think of some things as Disney even though they are owned by Disney. And also I'll quickly break down some eras of Disney film just so you can kind of understand where the Disney Company has come from and what they've gone through. And then lastly, I will discuss the different park locations, what they each offer, and how they kind of like put together Disney into their parks. In 1901, Walt Disney was born. He grew up with a love of drawing, but eventually will come to love animation and film as well. He attended the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts and then lied about his age in order to serve in World War I in the Army. After a rough start in film, Walt eventually landed upon Walt Brothers Studios, which we now know today is Hyperion Studios. 1928 is a big year for Disney because it's when Steamboat Willie is released. It was the first short to picture the newest character, Mickey Mouse. If you've ever seen a Disney animated movie, you've actually seen a part of Steamboat Willie before, since a short clip of it plays before the start of the movie. The studio originally only created short films, but in 1937 they produced their first full-length film, and it was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This movie did absolutely amazing in the box office, and when adjusted for inflation, it is the 10th highest grossing movie ever released. Moving on to 1955, Disneyland opened up in California. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but for now just know like this is around the time where Disneyland is coming. Sadly, in 1966, Walt Disney passed away from lung cancer. However, the company continued on with various levels of leadership, and the theme parks expanded into different locations worldwide, and for now, it doesn't look like the company's going anywhere anytime soon. Okay, so basically that's the events that happened, led to the Disney Company being created, and pretty much it. Now you've got your little bit of backstory about the Disney Company. Let's go on to the studios. So I'll see you next week. There are a whole lot of studios that are owned by Disney currently, and I am not an expert on like movie productions and the studios and how they work, so I can't tell you that I know that these are all the studios there are, and I in fact tell you that these aren't all the studios there are. However, I'll have a list of the major like big things owned by Disney. The first one is Disney Nature, and they're the ones that make all of those movies about animals and are not animated, they're in real life, like the Born in China movie, and I know the Penguins one that's coming up is about a penguin, so it like promotes nature and like shows you what's outside. Next are the live action Disney films, and they come from a studio I think called just like Disney Studios or something, and they have like the Dumbo movie, Nutcracker in the Four Realms, the Beauty and the Beast one with Emma Watson, Cinderella, and all those other live action remakes. So if you're watching a live action remake of a Disney movie, chances are you're watching one from this studio. The next is Disney Animation Studios. So this is the big one, and it started it all, and most movies known as Disney classics will fall into this studio. So most animated movies that are known as classics. So like you've got the Aristocats, and just most of the ones behind me I think are all Disney studios. Yeah. Next is ABC. It's a television network, and it is owned by Disney as well as all of the shows that play on that network. Such as American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, Grey's Anatomy, The Bachelor, Good Morning America. And those are all ones that you wouldn't think are Disney because like they don't have Mickey Mouse in them or anything, but they are in fact all owned by Disney. But in the same kind of vein, there's ABC Family, and this is a branch of the ABC network. A lot of popular TV shows are on this network as well, such as Pretty Little Liars, The Fosters, Shadowhunters, Switched at Birth, and a lot more. Okay. A good way to like find little hints at these shows in the parks is to either go to like the outside of the park behind the gates where they'll have posters and advertisements. A lot of the time they're for these TV shows. Also at Hollywood Studios I would assume they also have these sorts of posters. However, I only really am thinking about the ones at California. The next is the Disney Channel. This one has all your favorite kid shows, or mine at least. Well known for advertising only things that are owned by Disney. This network is kind of like, you know it's Disney because the name of it is Disney Channel, but if you've somehow forgotten what Disney Channel is and like what classics come up from here, it's like Hannah Montana, Sweet Life, Wizards of Waverly Place, what else do I have? Good Luck Charlie, Sunny with a Chance, Jessie, and like a ton more that I want to mention but I won't mention, but I probably mention. Next is Lucasfilm. It's a studio that makes Star Wars films. It was pretty recently acquired by Disney for a lot of money, and they have been since making a lot of reboots and sequels to the old Star Wars films. Determining what's in this studio is really easy because you just see like, is this Star Wars? Okay, Disney. They own everything, so. Pixar is the studio most commonly mistaken for Disney because it's the only other animation studio that they run, really. They've been making movies before Disney acquired them. Like Toy Story existed without Disney a while ago. But now you can see it everywhere, including the parks like Pixarland at California Adventure, which is a lot of fun. Okay, the next one is Marvel. This is pretty easy to like understand because before every Marvel movie you see like the little screen and it says Marvel. Although there are some specific details of what is Marvel determined by Sony and Marvel. Most movies originating from Marvel Comics are owned by Disney and they're in this studio. The exceptions would be Spider-Man movies made outside of the Avengers franchise. So like the new Spider-Man, which is Tom Holland, is Disney, but other ones like Into the Spider-Verse are not. Previously, X-Men movies all were not owned by Disney, but now that they've purchased 20th Century Fox, they are. Okay, now that I'm mentioning 20th Century Fox, let's move on to there. This is the newest addition to the Disney company. It was only a few months ago, and honestly, I'm not too like well versed. I don't know what's gonna happen since we haven't seen anything that's like happening from this. However, there are tons of just like recent movies and everything that is 20th Century Fox, and they kind of operate, I think they're going to kind of continue operating alone. It's unlikely that, like I said, like they're going to operate separately, and it's unlikely whether we're actually going to think of any of these movies as Disney. Just like with ABC and ABC Family, we don't think of those as like Disney, I think, most of the time. That definition is getting a little bit more unclear nowadays. In case that overwhelmed you, the main 4 ones to know, because there's a lot of them, are Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, and Disney Animation. These tend to be the ones incorporated the most into Disney parks. So that's mostly what you gotta know, because that's what's more considered like Disney, and that's sold at like Disney stores. So I'm helping you out. So next I'm talking about the eras of Disney film. Let's move on. So this one is probably my favorite category. I'm most excited to talk about. Before I start, I'd like to briefly give a disclaimer. I had to do a lot of research on this topic, so I suggest looking in the description for the links I use because I didn't reword it too well. I think there might be some like hints of plagiarism, but like I tried. So like I'll have my resources so you can go and check those out, and they'll have more information, and it's really an interesting article that I used for this one. The article I read has 7 Disney eras, and they start in 1937 and go up to the present, and it can kind of help you get a better idea of like Disney and like how it works and how it has been working and what's happened in the past that affects how the movies look today. 1937 to 1942 is commonly known as the Golden Era. This began after the release of Snow White and is characterized as when Walt Disney was the most looking over each film and most involved with what was produced by the company. So like some of the main movies released during that era are like Snow White, Bambi, Dumbo, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and there's more, but you know. The next era is 1943 to 1949, and it is known as the wartime era during World War II. It is recognized by the large number of short films produced by the company and package sets of miniature films being released on limited budgets. These smaller budgets came from the country and the company struggling as a whole during the war. None of these films are really popular, and I've actually seen most of them myself, and I can attest that they are not that great. And I would not like spend my time watching these if you have like other alternatives that you haven't seen. Some of the popular ones, some of the big ones during this time were Saludos Amigos, Tres Caballeros, Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Melody Time, Fun and Fancy Free. And some of those are actually okay. Some others like Ichabod and Mr. Toad, it's a little, I don't know, I don't like that one. The next is 1953 to 1959. It is known as the Silver Era because of the return to large budget, full feature-length animated films and many classics being produced during this time. They were produced with the oversight of Walt Disney, and it continues all of the advances in the Golden Age. This era ends around the time that Walt Disney died because that is like a big like point where the company really changed and the leadership was not as good afterwards, so a lot of the things coming out of the studio weren't as great. First, I need to tell you the examples. The examples are Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp. And the next one is 1970 and 1988. It is known as the Bronze Age. However, I've seen it called the Dark Age. I think the Bronze Age is really like more polite, but like the Dark Age gives you like a better idea. It's a spiral leading from Walt Disney's death into a lapse of good leadership, and many of the movies made during this time are good and I really like them, but they're not really memorable, especially like when they're considered classics. They're not the ones you'd think of. It came around the time of copy machines, so a lot of the movies were easier to make and you can make them with less money. However, Xerox machines originally only copied black lines, so a lot of the movies have very, very clear black lines in them, and if you want to go after this and like check out those movies during that time, you will see that there are black lines in them because that's all they could copy. The movies made such in this time are like The Black Cauldron, Robin Hood, Aristocats, Rescuers, Oliver and Company, and there's more. So, next is 1989 to 1999. It is the Disney Renaissance, when more contemporary classics were made. It is also seen as one of Disney Company's highs, especially after Walt Disney's passing, when there was a large box office success and more high-budget musicals being made. Because I know like in the beginning, like the Golden Era, there was a lot of musicals and really good Disney soundtracks, but during the Renaissance, the soundtracks are really amazing and I really like them all. Movies during this time are Little Mermaid, Mulan, Pocahontas, Lion King, Hercules, Tarzan, Aladdin, and more. Alright, so we're almost to the end. 2000 to 2009 is the post-Disney Renaissance era. This time saw success in those straight-to-DVD and television Disney sequels that were made by beginning animators at best. A lot of the sequels, they're actually were complete garbage. And although some of the movies that came out during this time were fairly underrated and I really liked, I think a lot of the sequels did not have to exist, and it was not great. At this time, Disney was really working on its purchase of Pixar, so like there's that positive, you know, like Pixar. And also it was really just a transition period because Disney was thinking of how to use CGI and how to tell stories in a new way. Movies that came out during this time are Dinosaur, Meet the Robinsons, Brother Bear, Lilo and Stitch, Atlantis, and Chicken Little. And actually, out of those movies, like, I picked some really good ones. Like, you could talk about the sequels, but those ones were actually really good. Like Brother Bear and Lilo and Stitch are two of my favorite Disney movies, so like, they had to be doing something right during that time. Now we've caught up to the present. Right now, we are in a Disney revival era, which started in 2010 with the release of Princess and the Frog and Tangled. Since then, we've been seeing a return to the quality of Disney movies that we expected after the Renaissance and Golden Era and all that time. Movies during this time are like all the ones coming out right now, but also like Big Hero 6, Tangled, Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph, Moana, and more. I'm kind of like getting concerned because they're making a lot of sequels, but they do tend to be better than they were in the past. As you can tell, all of these eras were really like ups and downs. There would be like Golden Era, and then there'd be the War, and then there'd be Silver Age, and then there'd be the Bronze Age or the Dark Ages, and then there would be the Renaissance, and then the post-Renaissance, and then the Revival, and then someday there's going to be the post-Revival, but let's hope we have enough time to come up with some more good movies before then. Thanks for watching. Let's go on to the parks. I am here with you now to give you the best information about the Disney parks. And since I went extremely in-depth with all my other topics, especially that last one there, I kind of want to keep this pretty brief. At all of the Disney parks, rides are themed after and tell the stories of popular Disney movies. And I think they do this a lot better than a lot of other theme parks like Six Flags or something that just have like roller coasters with the same colors. Disney will really go in depth and tell you the whole story of the movie in the 2 or 3 minute ride that you are going through. And so it's really interesting, and if you've never been on a Disney ride or to a Disney park, I really encourage it, especially the ones in Fantasyland that you might not think of riding because you're like waiting in line for Space Mountain. I think it might actually be interesting for you. Also, if you've never been to the parks, characters will roam around. They'll have lines for kids to take pictures with them, and there are very frequent parades around the parks with really cool floats that are really like well thought out. It's not just like a parade, a bunch of people walking. It's like really cool floats, fireworks, or a light show depending every night, which is really cool. Hordes of families attend the parks every day and flood lines so that the parks themselves become so packed sometimes that you can't really do much of anything. But if you come during the right times, you should be able to. There will always be other people at Disneyland, and that's something I've learned over the years, is that you don't come to Disneyland one day and it's just like empty. It's always going to be kind of busy, but that should never like deter away from the fun you're going to have, because Disneyland is always fun. I've never had a bad experience at Disneyland or Disney World or anything. There are a total of 6 Disney resorts, but an even larger number of parks and hotels. Most resorts have multiple parks, and I have had the privilege to visit most of them, and so I've kind of like, I have a reason to talk about them. I've had a really good experience at every park I've went to, so if you're like looking for the worst park, like I can't really tell you. I have an idea, but like I don't want to just say it's bad. So let's start with Disney World. Disney World in Florida has 4 parks: Epcot, Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom, and Magic Kingdom. They also have a water park called Typhoon Lagoon, but that usually doesn't really count in like number of theme parks since it's fairly small and it's just like a water park. It's not much exciting. Disney World is by far the largest property owned by Disneyland, with a total of 25 Disney hotels in the area surrounding the parks. These range from budget hotels to expensive and fancy places. It's definitely ideal for like a whole trip devoted to it, and maybe like you could go with your family. And there's not really much to do in the area, so Disneyland is a great place to go. And you can go to a different park every day. A lot of the parks are really interesting, like Animal Kingdom. They have a lot of real animals there, and in Epcot you can learn a lot about other countries, so it's pretty cool. Disneyland in California is much smaller with only 2 parks, California Adventure and Disneyland, and 3 hotels. So this was the one that was first made. It's been there since the 50s, I think. However, these parks are continuously growing, so you're not going to go there and like expect an old place. No. There's a ton of new additions coming all the time, like Star Wars Land and the new Marvel places, and Pixar Pier is fairly new too, so like you can always discover new things whenever you go. The location is within an hour of Los Angeles, so if you are planning on visiting Los Angeles, it might be in your best interest to go to Disneyland for a day or 2. I do recommend going at least 2 days to Disneyland. Tokyo, Disneyland, and Disney Sea are 2 parks within a very short train ride of downtown Tokyo. Disney Sea is a very unique park, and if you've never been there, I highly recommend it because of their beautiful decoration that cannot be seen at any other parks. They have this Jules Verne area with a big volcano that's really cool. If you've ever seen Journey to the Center of the Earth, they have a ride themed after it. They also have like Agrabah, a Little Mermaid area. That's really cool. It's definitely a must-see if you're a Disney fan. If you are going to Tokyo and are a Disney fan in any capacity, I recommend going at least a day. When I went to Tokyo, I went 2 days, but I think if you have gone to another Disneyland park, you do not need to go to Disneyland. I think Disney Sea is the only place you really need to go. Next is Disneyland Paris. Disneyland Paris has 2 parks as well, one of which is modeled after Hollywood Studios in Orlando, and the other is like the classic Disneyland. These parks are more prone to ride closures and often lack exciting events that the other parks have in the United States. However, I still think these parks are really great, and they have a lot of unique rides that they don't have any other places. I was reading a little bit about Fan Days last year, and I think that's really cool, so they're probably stepping up their events game as well. Okay, next is Disneyland in Hong Kong, which is only one very small park. I have not been there personally, but I am going in the future, so I'm excited. It does seem to be extremely overshadowed by the other park in Shanghai. However, because even though there is one park in Shanghai, it is really new, just opened up a few years ago, or maybe last year, and it is like twice the size of the Hong Kong park. So if you are going to Shanghai, I recommend Shanghai. If you're going to Hong Kong, I recommend Hong Kong. You know, as you do. You're looking for my favorite and least favorite parks. I will say I think Hong Kong is probably the worst Disney park, even though I have not been there and it may be amazing. I don't know, maybe there's something I'm missing, but just from what I've heard, like the castle is very small, the park is very small, and that's what I think. But out of the ones I've been to, Disneyland Paris. The best Disney park in my opinion is I can't decide. I have like a favorite and then like the one I love the most. The best park is probably Epcot. My favorite park is Disneyland in Anaheim, because I think if you're going to a Disneyland park, you need to go to a Disneyland park, which I mean is like kind of like Magic Kingdom, but also Disneyland is the original. But Epcot is really cool. It has a lot of stuff to do, and I really recommend that one. Maybe it is the happiest place on earth. It's sunset. That's probably why the lighting's been terrible the whole time, but it's fine. I'm fine. It's all fine. I look like a tomato probably, but it's okay. The next segment is my little, like, before you leave, here's some Disney if you haven't been convinced to watch Disney movies yet. Quick disclaimer, I do not own any of the following clips. I'm going to be turning off the audio and putting some cool copyright-free music on top of them, just so I don't get copyright striked. But, you know, they're all owned by Disney. Wow! What a surprise! I recommend you watch all of these movies. If there's one movie on this clip you haven't seen, go and watch it right now. think that's about it. All of the basic Disney information. Hopefully, if you were wondering about what the Disney company is before this, you now understand. It's not Disney Animation, it's like a company. They do own a lot of stuff, and you can now have that knowledge and apply it in your life. And I hope you will take this video as inspiration to continue learning and watching Disney movies. Currently, I have been trying to work my way through all of the 56 feature-length animated Disney movies. If you're a Giant fan, I would like to challenge you also to watch all 56 of these movies. But if you're less obsessed, I would think maybe look up one of the clips I just showed you, if it looked interesting, or one of the ones I said for the eras, if like a name stuck out to you. Like, start there and then just go on your Disney journey. Thank you so much for watching. This video took a lot more effort than my other videos, and because of the really long watch time thing, it's probably not going to get as many views, so like, please support me by commenting and subscribing and watching the whole thing. In the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, come inside, it's fun inside. MICKEY MOUSE, that's me!